Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. The transfer portal is open for another 24 hours as you're listening to this podcast. We're actually recording it sometime in the middle of the afternoon on Wednesday. At the time we're recording this, Ohio State has lost 33 players to the portal, and they replaced them with 11 players. So far, of the 33 they've lost, 16 have found a new home, and only 2 ended up at places where making the college football playoff in 2025 by the end of the season was a realistic possibility. We're going to run through all 33 players that they've lost so far. We're going to run through all 11 players that they've added so far, because this has been a 2-week-long period of replacing potential with production, and that'll obviously continue. As a reminder, Friday, 11:59 is when players can go into the portal. Until that moment, Ohio State can continue to add players from the portal after that, because once you're in, you're in. You just only have 2 weeks to go into the portal, and that will close, obviously, on Friday at 11:59. So target at 12 a.m. Who's ever in the portal, that's who's in the portal. There will be nobody left to add. Again, we're going to run through everybody who left.
Indiana and Miami, just as clarification, except from Indiana and Miami. Those players can enter the portal, too, after their season ends on January 19th.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter to Ohio State, though. This is more like Ohio State can't. I'm saying Ohio State can't lose anybody else after Friday.
Yeah, correct.
That's all I'm saying. Sure. Who they add from is a whole different conversation. Essentially, what we're doing is this. Run through the players. Was this a good trade-off? And just have an honest conversation about what we think about how the 2026 Ohio State football roster is starting to shape out. And we're going to start at quarterback. Stefan, they lost 2, added 1. Lincoln Kienholz, the backup quarterback this year. He was the 4th-string quarterback in 2024, and he was the 3rd-string quarterback his first year here in 2023. Never started a game here. Probably his biggest moment was the 2023 Cotton Bowl when Devin Brown got hurt after Kyle McCord had walked in the portal, and that didn't necessarily go well. And then he battles Julian Sand to be the starter in 2025, loses that battle, and serves as the backup quarterback. Mason Mag, everybody's under scholarship now, so technically speaking, Mason Mag is a scholarship player, but obviously, for me personally, I like to describe it. There's like the traditional sense of like, hey, if we were living in the old world, who would be under the 85 and then who would be considered a walk-on? Mason Mag was a walk-on who now, when they went to 105, is a scholarship quarterback. They lose both of them. Lincoln Kienholz is now at Louisville. Mason Mag has not found a new home yet, to my understanding, and Justin Martin is who they bring in, for who started his career at UCLA and transfers to Maryland, and now he's headed to Ohio State in what will essentially be the 2026 version of what Eli Brickhandler was this past year and what Tristan Gebbia was in 2023. What do we think of this trade-off, 2 for 1, for what Ohio State needs in its quarterback room in 2026?
I think it's fine, because I think replacing Lincoln Kienholz was never going to be about getting someone out of the transfer portal to come be your backup quarterback or compete with Julian Sane for the starting role. The portal was always going to be about going out, getting another Eli Brickhandler type, which they accomplished, and Tavian St. Clair just stepping in, as a second-year guy, being ready to be a backup to Julian Sane. So I think it's a fair trade-off. I think it's a sign of the development of Tavian St. Clair, and also a sign of the comfort and confidence that you have with Julian Sane being your starter going into another season. So this was probably one of the more predictable position groups, just in the way things panned out in terms of what you lost and what you gained in the portal. I think you're fine at quarterback with what happened. I would even maybe say they won the trade just because Tavian St. Clair is still on a path that you expected.
Yeah, I think it's a equal trade-off with losing 2 and adding Martin. Look, veteran guy in the room, 2022, played at UCLA, played at Maryland, didn't really do a lot of playing when he was at UCLA or Maryland.
Was with Chip Kelly.
He was with Chip Kelly in 22 and 23. He's a bigger guy. He's like 6'5", 230, 6'5", 235. So like, I don't know. When I first saw that, my first thought was, well, there's a good scout team guy for like whenever you play a bigger quarterback. So yeah, I think it's an even trade. And then I think when you bake into account, you're probably going to get more out of Tavian, and you're probably going to get a step from him. And, you have Luke Fahey entering the room. It's like, I think you win. So I think taking into account development, it's a win for Ohio State.
So the room in 2026, I think this is probably one of the rooms where you can say, okay, it's final. Like, they're not going to add anybody else. They're not going to lose anybody else. This is what the room is going to be. Julian Sand as the starter, Tavian St. Clair as the backup with Justin Martin, Luke Fahey. Up next, I think, Gillis, if we run into a situation like they ran into with the Cotton Bowl, where for whatever reason they're not playing in a college football playoff game and Julian Sand is gone and something happens to Tavian in that game, I actually think they would go to Luke Fahey before they went to Justin Martin, simply because, like, why wouldn't you just go with the guy who's eventually you think going to play football for you one day, just like they did back then? They went with Lincoln Keenholz over Tristan Gebbia in that game. Justin Martin is here in a break glass if emergency situation. And that's if like Tavian doesn't take the step we all expect him to take now that he's a year into this. And like, Tavian St. Clair is the backup quarterback. Justin Martin is here just in case that's not true. And you head into the week one, you're like, I don't know yet with Tavian. Maybe he needs a little bit more time, though. I don't think anybody is expecting that. Moving on to running back, lost 2. They haven't added anybody yet. James Peoples was here for 2 years. He was an understudy to Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in 2024, was expected to be the starter in 2025, was to start the season, and by the end of the year, he had fallen behind and gone to being running back 4 in that hierarchy. Sam Williams-Dixon was here for 2 years as well. He actually hopped in the portal last year, but decided to come back. He was running back 5 coming into the season. He was running back 5 leaving the season, and now he has moved on. Is at Penn State with Matt Campbell, and Sam Dixon is at South Carolina. Andrew, no ads yet. So what do we think of the losses that Ohio State's had so far? And do you think they need to go and add another running back to a room that right now will feature Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, Turbo Rogers, and Favor Akey?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like, there are certain positions on this roster where, like when you were in like elementary school and they would teach you like the difference between needs and wants, and they were like, need, shelter, food, water. You don't need a running back, but you want a running back, I think. The question is, what type of running back would you want? I would probably say a CJ Donaldson-ish player, good pass blocker, veteran guy in the room, because, this room still is pretty young. You have Bo Jackson second year, Isaiah West second year, Favor Akey, Legend Bay, Turbo Rogers, Turbo's third year, obviously, or second year, with Jackson and West. But I think the room is fine. I think the room is in a decent spot, but you want something else. I think wanting is probably where I would say that this room is at right now, rather than you need to go get a running back. I think, if you had lost an Isaiah West or a Bo Jackson, this would obviously be a need. I would not rely on another freshman to do the job. So that's where I'm at. It's if it makes sense for you to go grab a veteran that is cool with a 2/3 role in this offense, then you take it. Otherwise, you just move on and you say, when Isaiah better be ready to be our 1-2, and then we'll figure out our third from there.
I disagree. I think you need one of those guys. I think they need a veteran in the room. I mean, like, sure, there's a natural progression that's going to come with Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, but we spent all this time talking about production over potential, and there is a bit of projecting that we're doing with Bo and Isaiah taking that next step. And when we talk about pass pro and other elements that come with being a running back, I think those are areas where Ohio State's running back room can still improve. And also, like, you look at a guy like Turbo Rogers, he hasn't been healthy in a while. Like, that's scary to depend on him to be your third running back, or even Favor Akey to be your third running back in a room where the top 2 guys are true sophomores. So I think Ohio State needs to go get another running back, and probably one that's been around college football for a little bit. And whether you read reports or just, rumors and stuff like that, it sounds like they are pushing to get a running back. Like, there has been plenty of names that have come up in the portal throughout the last couple of weeks, even before Bo Jackson announced that he was coming back, that there were names that came up where it was like, Ohio State might go after this guy. They might go after this guy. So it's pretty clear that they've been looking for a running back. And I would kind of expect at this point that they're going to go get one.
I think the running back room needs to check off everything that goes into having elite running back play at Ohio State. And that did not happen last year. I think Bo Jackson is a very good running back. Isaiah West flashed some things at times. They don't have a guy who can take the top off a defense and go hit a home run. And to be honest with you, I think James Peoples flashed that at times last year, but it wasn't consistent enough that they felt like they could rely on it. Yeah, I don't think they need to go get a CJ Donaldson anymore. I think that was fine last year. If Bo Jackson and Isaiah West are 2 years into their college football careers and they still can't pass pro, then we're going to be looking at Carlos Loughlin and going, hey, what the heck is going on? Why do you still have to take them off the field in these situationals? I'm not saying they have to be Travion Henderson level. Travion Henderson was one of the best pass pro running backs in college football by the time he left here, but he wasn't when he first got here. That took some time for him to learn. And there needs to be improvement in that. And that's not just, that's on Carlos Locklin as their coach, but that's also on Bo Jackson and Isaiah West to just be better at that. They need a dude where we gave you the ball. This was supposed to go 7 yards, but you got to the second level and you made a safety or a linebacker miss, and now all of a sudden it's a 45-yard touchdown. They didn't hit enough home runs last year. The run that Bo Jackson had against Michigan, awesome run. Did he score a touchdown on it? Or did he get hawked down at the first 1 yard line? He had a run like that against Penn State where he got hawked down at like the 3 yard line. Like, they can't happen in 2026. So whether Bo Jackson or Isaiah West takes a jump or you go add a guy, somebody in that running back room needs to be able to turn a run into a touchdown explosively and not get hawked down, especially when you're talking about a team who has routinely multiple times over the last 7 years had red zone issues. You know what solves red zone issues? Scoring touchdowns outside the red zone. So I'm with you, Steph. They need to go get a dude. And running back is one of those positions where it's all, I'm not going to say it's easy to find a dude. It's not like there's Jeremiah Love and Bijan Robinson in the transfer portal. But there's a lot of dudes who are like Bo Jackson level in the transfer portal, which is why when the whole Bo Jackson thing was happening, it's Bo Jackson's a great football player. I do think they could have found another Bo Jackson. So how about you just have multiple Bo Jacksons on your roster? I agree with you, Stefan. Wide receiver. Lots of turnover here.
Mm-hmm.
You lose Quincy Porter after 57 snaps in 4 games and 4 touches as a 5-star receiver. He's headed to Notre Dame. You lose Mylan Graham after 3 years. He's headed to Notre Dame as the only other receiver in the 2024 recruiting class alongside Jeremiah Smith. Both were 5 stars. Both Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham leave despite maybe you could have maybe projected them as starters in 2026 if they had the types of off seasons we expected both of them to have. Instead, maybe they'll be starters at Notre Dame, which means that Notre Dame will have 2/3 of Ohio State's second string wide receiver unit from the 2025 group. Good luck, CJ Carr. Show us what you got. Bodpin Miller. He leaves after 1 year. He was always going to be more of a project as a wide receiver at Ohio State. He decides to leave. Maybe some of that is, I think he's one of those guys you can chalk up to. Brian Hartline's not here. He's the reason I agreed to be here. Yeah. Maybe I'll try my luck somewhere else. And maybe he won't even be a wide receiver because Gillis, as I'm learning, he was like a quarterback.
Yeah, he was a quarterback at Ontario High School, and in his senior year, they were working him in at receiver just so he could play. So like this wasn't like a, oh hey look, he's playing receiver at Ohio State and he's a project. This was like a, here's how you run a slant. It was a much longer project than I think people thought. This was not a 2-year thing. This was like a 3 or 4.
Okay, so he might not even be a receiver wherever he goes next. I guess we'll see what happens. Bryson Rogers was here for 3 years as a member of the 2023 recruiting class, was a backup his entire career here, and now he's following Brian Hartline to South Florida. And then they lost Demarion Witten, who could have been a tight end, could have been a wide receiver. He just kind of became a tweener. It's probably even in a pre-NIL world, if we just had a transfer portal, this would probably have been the point. It's kind of like now or never for Demarion Witten at Ohio State in terms of what position he was going to play in. So, okay, this is whatever. And then Dorian Williams, he would have been a walk-on by previous rule standards. Is now on scholarship. He is now in the transfer portal. I think Dorian Williams is actually pretty good. I think a G5 school might hit it like a diamond in the rough with this kid. And then they bring in Devin McEwen from UTSA as a guy who probably will operate in the slot with Brandon Ennis. Is a bit of a speed guy. We're talking about explosive players at running back. I mean, this is a guy who could be explosive with the ball in his hands at receiver, which was also missing for Ohio State last year. Gillis, what do we think of this trade-off so far? And that doesn't mean they're done adding receivers. In a world where you lost 6, you're probably not only going to bring in 1, but you've also got guys in your recruiting class. But from a transfer portal standpoint, what do you think of this trade-off?
It's not great. And I think there's a couple different ways to look at this. Like, I think you kind of have to blend all these things together. You have to dump the glass half full into the glass half empty type of conversation, right? Like you have to mix these things. I think it's entirely fair to say, how did you lose 2 5-star receivers when this is supposed to be wide receiver U and blah, blah, blah. I also think it's entirely fair to point out they might not have started in 2026. I think it's entirely fair to point out Quincy Porter had been on and off the injury report and you hadn't really seen a lot, and he wanted a pay raise and he wanted more playing time, and he got that guaranteed pretty much at Notre Dame. Like Quincy Porter will start at Notre Dame if he's healthy. Mylan Graham maybe Mylan Graham also had not really played for you either. I think there is a genuine, hey, this isn't as bad as it may seem losing 2 5-stars because you still have JJ, you still have Ennis, you still have Chris Henry Jr. I think there's also a, what in the world's going on? How did you lose these guys? You're supposed to be the development plays, blah, 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 blah. So I think it's a net negative for Ohio State. Look, if your first 3 receivers are Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, and Chris Henry Jr., and McEwen is your 4, and he kind of rotates in, like, you would still probably rather have a Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham. And like, Steven, we had talked about this, like, whether offline or not, Quincy Porter, it felt like had kind of jumped Mylan Graham, and he had been hurt. And had there been maybe some better health news for him, he would have been seeing more playing time and more reps than Mylan. So it's like losing him, I think, is a bigger deal than losing Mylan Graham. But yeah, the depth is going to get tested here, right? If those are your 4, you have David Adolph is still here,
who was playing over all of them.
Who was playing over all of them. So, you would have liked to see maybe what they could do with Cortez Hankton. I brought up the idea that, maybe some of these receivers and their development and their maybe lack of in 2025 was because Hartline wasn't as involved maybe as he was, and maybe Cortez Hankton could have helped that and really sped up that development. That could have helped. Losing those 2 guys who, while maybe not proven, are certainly very, very talented, that hurts because now you're looking at your room going, Phillip Bell, you're going to have to be in the 2 deep, right? This is your second year. This is when it's time to go. Jerquaden Guilford, I think, is somebody that we also need to talk about being in the 2 deep. That dude did not have a great start to his high school career and popped like nobody else late. So he's somebody that could find that mix as well. But you are going to need some guys to step up depth-wise where maybe you could have thought, if Guilford doesn't give us anything, that's okay. If Phillip Bell doesn't give us anything in year 2, we'll see what it is year 3. Now you need some of those guys to step up because Porter and Graham are gone. So it's not ideal. I'll say that.
What do you think, Stefan?
Yeah, I think the word I would probably use is incomplete, because I think they're definitely going to go out and get at least one more other guy to bring in here. But I think right now, you're looking at a bit of a net negative because, you're lacking a lot of depth and you're relying on some younger guys to come in. And, McEwen, I think he brings something specific that Ohio State lacked last year, even in a talented receiver room, but also, is he a 1,000-yard receiver in the Big Ten? I don't necessarily know if he is that either, right? So it's like he brings an element of an explosiveness, but I think when you kind of look at the room as a whole, you've taken maybe a little bit of a step back, at least, in terms of where things stand and now at the time of recording.
I'm going to take a different approach to this. What we have to remember is there's 3 different wide receiver positions. So when we've had some texters go, I can't believe we held on to Brandon Ennis and let Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter walk. Those are not 1 per 1. That's apples to oranges. Brandon Ennis is a slot receiver. Mylan Graham is not a slot receiver. I know we've had fun with he's the next Garrett Wilson and all that, and he was wearing number 5. Garrett Wilson actually went from X receiver as a freshman to slot receiver as a sophomore to X receiver as a junior. That is not the path that Mylan Graham has ever been on. He's never been an X receiver here. He's been a Z receiver, and then there's the X receiver. The X receiver is Jeremiah Smith. So if Quincy Porter wanted to be a true bona fide wide receiver 1 X receiver, as he probably could be, he's 6'3", 190 plus pounds. Okay, then I was almost thinking to myself, then why'd you come to Ohio State? Because you knew that was not going to be reasonably possible until your 3rd year for you to do that. Sure, are there money things too? Probably. But if we're just talking strictly football, because I don't want every conversation we have to turn into money, because then that's just not fun. If we're going to look at this strictly from a football standpoint, if you were Quincy Porter, you are a year younger than the dude everybody is calling Julio Jones, then you probably knew, best case scenario, I'm starting opposite of that guy at Z receiver. Mm-hmm. And I'm not backside of the formation getting the 10 plus targets a game because that guy is getting those targets. So from that standpoint, it understands why Quincy Porter is gone. So I don't think that's a net negative. Like, sure, Quincy Porter's got a high ceiling. You know whose ceiling's higher than everybody's? Jeremiah Smith. And you know who's going to be X receiver when Jeremiah Smith leaves? The guy who's going to be starting opposite of Jeremiah Smith this year, and that's Chris Henry Jr. So if we're just talking strictly where they would have fit into the hierarchy within their specific position groups, I guess time will tell. Because if Chris Henry Jr. has Carnell Tate's stat line from 2024, and JJ's going nuclear because he's JJ, and then you've got Brandon Ennis and Devin McEwen in the slot, I don't think this is a miss for Ohio State. It's a miss from a depth standpoint, sure, but nobody has depth anymore. That's kind of the point here, is you don't get to hold on the 5-star receivers. and tell them to wait for 3 years anymore. Not when you're paying them and you can't afford to have them sitting, and not when they think they should get paid and also think they should be playing. What we had in 2021, where you had 5 dudes and Marv and Emeka were just cool sitting there, you're not going to get that anymore. So I think the names are shiny. Oh, sure. I think immediately you go, hey, Ohio State lost 2 5-star receivers. Well, what the heck is going on? How come they lost 2 5-star receivers? Because they were going to be sitting behind 2 5-star receivers who were the number 1 receivers in their recruiting class. One is the best wide receiver prospect of the past decade, and the other one's the son of an NFL player who's 6'5", 210 pounds, and looks like he might be a contested catch merchant. If Chris Henry Jr. has 12 touchdowns simply, and they're all like goal line fades next year, would anybody be shocked?
Not at all.
Right. So I don't. He's
going to be the Jerome Bettis of receivers. He's going to have a yards per catch. He's going to yards after catch. Yeah. He's going to be 2.
So I think I get it. Like, they lost some 5-star receivers, and that's a big deal. And they lost some depth, but they played their depth. They had to play their depth this year, and it didn't look good. And one of those guys was, and these 2 were part of the reason it didn't look good. Quincy Porter wasn't healthy, and Mylan Graham didn't look great. So I think Devin McEwen is a solid pickup for what they need him to be. I think Brandon Ennis brings something to the slot receiver position, but I don't think we saw enough. Here's the ball, short pass, turn it into something. And I think Devin McEwen gives them that. Is the room from a standpoint of 1 through 10 as good as it's been in years past from a recruiting talent standpoint? Probably not. It's not as shiny, sure. But is the top of the room still as, like, I don't know, would you still say that the Ohio State's starting wide receivers are amongst the best starting wide receiver units in college football in 2026?
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's an element to McEwen too that's interesting because he gives you a little versatility. Like, he very much fits the description of a slot guy. He played out wide a pretty good amount at UTSA. And granted, that's a program where it's just like G5, G6 programs. It's like, if you're the best receiver, we'll put you wherever the hell we want to put you because you're one of the best receivers. Like, that's fine. He definitely fits more of like a slot description at Ohio State. But like, I don't know, did you feel like you had that level of versatility with Quincy and Mylan when they were there? So it's sure your top 4 might not, or I guess your top 6 might not look quite as sexy on paper, but your top 4, you have a guy that can kind of fill in wherever you need him to. So it's like, if you view this guy as a backup to that guy, it's like, let's say you thought Mylan would have been the backup to Quincy Porter going into next season or something like that, right? We're going to take Chris Henry Jr. out of this conversation. Okay, you lose both those guys. Now you bring in Chris Henry Jr. McEwen, I think on paper, will write him down as the backup to Brandon Ennis, but he could go in and if Chris Henry needs to come out for a snap, play that role. You could have McEwen, Brandon Ennis, and Jeremiah Smith be your 3 receivers on the field at the same time, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be Phillip Bell as a guy who comes in when Chris Henry Jr. Exits the game. You can have 3 receivers on the field and have it be McEwen, Ennis, and Jeremiah Smith. So that is the one part of McEwen adding him that I do like, is that he gives you that explosiveness. He's kind of a smaller slot guy, shifty, fast, all that. But he's also shown that he can play out wide a little bit, and I think that's an interesting addition to this roster to have a little bit of that versatility, especially when we know they're going to put Jeremiah Smith in the slot a few times.
Yep. I think they're going to be moving JJ around a lot.
Yeah,
because
I think they're going to have to.
Yeah, you have to.
So
because
especially early in the season, Texas has already shown us how they're going to defend Jeremiah Smith. They've shown us 2 years or twice in as many years. You don't think they're going to do that when the guy on the other side is a true freshman who's playing in the biggest game of his career?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a
you're going to move around Jeremiah Smith, and McEwen's an interesting guy to have part of that.
There's going to be a really fun spring practice conversation where we're talking about Brandon Ennis and Chris Henry Jr. taking that next step, because like Steven's been around longer than we have, Stefan, but like how many times have you looked at the number 2 receiver in Ohio State's offense and been like, lock it in, first round pick, no doubt. Like, not a debate. He's a first-round pick one day. And if it's Brandon Ennis, like right now, I would not say lock it in, no doubt. Oh, slam dunk, easy, A+ first-round pick. So it's like that to me, like his development and him taking a step is big. And, I would say the same thing for Chris Henry Jr. Like, I don't know if you need both, but I think preferably you would have both if you're Ohio State. But I think one of them taking a leap forward is going to be a big.
And listen, we'll spend a lot more time doing that as we get closer to spring. I think from this perspective, this was going to be the worst wide receiver 2 Ohio State has had in the last 7 years. I don't think that would have changed if Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter were still here, based on what we've seen already. Because I mean, look at who their wide receivers 2s have been since 2020. Their wide receiver 2 that year, Chris Olave. 2021, the wide receiver 2 that year, Chris Olave. 22, Emeka Egbuka. 23, Emeka Egbuka. 2024, Emeka Egbuka. 25, Carnell Tate. There's just not an established guy this time around who has done it at that level. Maybe Brandon Ennis takes that step this year, but still, that wasn't going to change, whether it was Chris Henry Jr. starting opposite of Jeremiah Smith, or it's Devin McEwen, or it's Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter. It's just two of those names are a little bit more shiny because they had 5 stars next to the name on a website. Moving on to tight end, you trade in Jelani Thurman after 3 seasons where he was at best tight end number 4 this year, though I do think he would have moved up the hierarchy a little bit. I wonder if Jelani would have stayed if he knew for sure that Max Clare was leaving for the NFL draft. But I guess we'll never know because he's at North Carolina now. And they bring in Hunter Wilson from Northwestern and Mason Williams from Ohio. Stefan, what do we think of this trade-off?
I think tight end is among maybe the best work that they've done in the transfer portal this offseason. I like a lot of what they've done because if we're looking strictly, they won the transfer portal trade, right? They got 2 pretty good guys and they lost a guy who was pretty deep on the depth chart. But, you know, this conversation you can't really have without talking about Max Clare and Will Kazmarek leaving as well. And you went out and kind of found the perfect replacements for them, along with, you know, we think Nate Roberts is going to take a step forward and be part of this conversation. You would hope that Bennett Christian takes a step forward and is, you know, I mean, he's been a pretty firm part of the tight end rotation the last 2 seasons. You would imagine being at least the most veteran guy in terms of being at Ohio State, that he, you know, continues to take a step forward, you know, in his progression this year. And I think you're in a pretty good spot with your tight end room. I think Mason Williams it's funny because he's literally coming from the same university from Ohio in the transfer portal to fill the role of Will Kazmarek, who came to Ohio State from Ohio. And there's just a lot of their mold. 60% of Mason Williams' snaps last year at Ohio were run blocking. That's almost the exact percentage that you had with Will Kazmarek. Whereas Max Clare, he played 30% of snaps on run blocks.
Yeah.
You know, Welsing is coming in. He's a little bit higher than that. He was 46.7 last year at Northwestern, a little bit more. But, like, you can see the correlation here of what they have envisioned, right? Of we're losing Kazmarek, here's Mason Williams. We're losing Max Clare, here's Hunter Welsing. I like what they've done with the tight end room. And you don't lose, like, you haven't lost really a ton to the portal. Like, Kazmarek and Clare leaving is your big departures, but, like, you lose Jelani Thurman, sure, but, like, you retain Bennett Christian, you retain Nate Roberts. Like, that's huge wins to keep those guys from going into the transfer portal because, you know, like, you see the guys that they bring in and maybe they work their way up the depth chart. And if you're Nate Roberts or Bennett Christian, I don't think anyone would necessarily blame you for entering the transfer portal. You get those guys to stay. So I think it's net positive for Ohio State in the transfer portal at tight end, and I like a lot of what they've done in this room. I also love, like, Hunter Welsing. He's going into his 7th year of college football. Like, if you could have a dude like that on your roster, and I know, Steven, you roll your eyes because it's ridiculous that someone's going into their 7th year of college football, but, like, okay, fact of the matter, is Ohio State breaking a rule by having a 7th year tight end on its roster?
No, I hate
Steven
this.
wants that man to have a LinkedIn page, not a link on a page on Ohio State Buckeyes.com.
Steven doesn't want to. Steven's not rude and wanting him to go, like, in the workforce. You're fine with him going to the NFL.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Yeah. He's 25. Of course he's better than the 19-year-old. He's a grown man. But you are correct.
Get kicked off mom and dad's insurance.
But you are correct. They're not breaking rules by doing it. Ohio State just lost a football game to a 7th-year quarterback. So, yes.
Right. Yeah, so it's like if there's a 7th-year tight end out there who actually had a pretty good season last year. I know, like, it's a 7th season. Injuries have gotten in the way for him, right? Like, it's not like it's been a full, you know, he's been playing since 2020 every single season. He's been all Big Ten every year. Like, there has been ups and downs, and he showed you last year when he's healthy that he can be pretty good, and you bring him in. So this is a good transfer portal class. I'm really happy with what Ohio State did at tight end and excited about what those guys can bring.
Yeah, this to me, it's this or one other position that we're going to talk about soon where you can look at and say they lost a lot and they did their best to replace it. I think there's one other position that probably fills that idea, maybe 2, but yeah, like, you lose Kazmarek and Thurman to the portal, but then you add Welsing and Williams. All right, you went and got Will Kazmarek 2.0, like, literally the same guy. He played for a couple of years at OU, and now he's coming up to Columbus. Like, I don't know, that feels notable that, you know, there is that pipeline going and that they are relatively similar sized. Like, they're both 6'5", 6'6". Like, they're both really, really big guys that can block a lot. Like, I think that works. I think that makes sense. You know, Welsing is that veteran guy in the room. I think this is one of those things where you can look at and say, It's reasonable that Ohio State's tight end room takes maybe a slight step back next year because you did lose two NFL draft picks. I think it's reasonable to look at Ohio State's tight end room and say, well, you added Williams and Kazmara can be pretty similar players, and then Welsing and Christian, and then Nate Roberts taking that step can be, a really big addition to that room, and maybe the tight end room is better. Like, this is one of those things where could be better, could be worse, but in terms of like how you want to grade what they did in the portal, they protected themselves and they did everything they could to add to that room. Now, we will have questions, I'm sure, during spring and as we go into the season, whether they are as tight end reliant and as tight end heavy as they were this past season in 2025. But that's not the point here. They lost Claire to the NFL draft. I know it wasn't a portal thing, but they did what they had to do to make sure that that room is in a good spot for 2026.
Oh no, do less 13 and 14 personnel and more 11. What a shame. Offensive line. You lose Tegra Shabola, 2-year starter, 4-year guy in the program for you. You lose Isaiah Kema, who under the previous rules would have been a walk-on. He actually has found a new spot. He's at Utah. Tegra Shabola is at Kentucky now, which, if I'm remembering correctly, I think Kentucky tried to flip him. He was coming out of high school, like, because Vince Mero was there. So he ended up at the other landing spot that he probably would have landed at had he not committed to Ohio State, though. He was one of the first people to commit to Ohio State in that 2022 recruiting class. Isaiah Kema is now at Utah. Devontae Armstrong, one of the two twins from Lakewood, Ohio. I think he was the guard one. He is now in the transfer portal. And then Javon McFadden, who was a guard here, is he Jordan Seaton's cousin, or are they just friends?
I'm not quite sure. I know there was a tie there, and I know Colorado was involved with his recruitment, like when he was coming out of high school.
Okay.
So I'm actually not sure.
Okay, because they have been, not just like recently when Jordan Seaton goes, hey, you want to come play together? Like, they've been like interactive with each other on social media for a couple of years now. I don't know. There's something there. And then they lose Justin Terry, who literally got here last spring and then is back in the portal already, which I think Justin Terry is just like you're just cutting. I don't want to call it dead weight. I don't want to call people dead weight, but you understand what I'm getting at here. You can't hold on to everybody in that room. Javon McFadden seems to be suffering the same fate that a lot of the 2025 recruiting class members are suffering, or it's just like, we're going to go get somebody who's older and more proven than you are, or we're just cutting dead weight. Devontae Armstrong, that was 2 years in. Maybe it's not necessarily turning into something, so you cut your losses there. And then we've already talked about Kim and Shapola. Nobody added from the transfer portal. I'm going to speak on behalf of the pod real quick. Find a rich person and pay Jordan Seaton if you can. Cool? That's all we're going to say on the matter, because he's probably not coming to Ohio State. Do they need to add a portal guy, Stefan, or is the room fine? People in our text thread, 614-350-3315, have been screaming at us, where are the offensive linemen? Why are there no offensive linemen?
Yeah, I think they're fine. I don't necessarily think they have to go out and get more offensive linemen. I think if they sign a guy or two, maybe with a profile comparable to like Justin Terry last year, where it's like you're kind of bringing him in, knowing he's just going to be a depth piece for you. You can never have too many offensive linemen in the offensive line room, right? Like, depth can never be too vast. But I think they look at their roster and they say, and we don't, at the time of our recording, we're not 100% certain on Carson Hinsman's decision yet. He has the option to enter or to come back to Ohio State. I would imagine there's probably some momentum for him coming back to Ohio State. But even if he departs, I think they feel pretty good about having their starting five on the roster. So yeah, like a guy like Jordan Seaton, if he's out there, you try to see if you can find the money to get a guy like him to show up, just because he's, proven to an extent, and that's a first round, pick at offensive lineman. But overall, I think they look at their roster and say, we have the guys we need. We have Saraveld, Phillip Daniels, potentially Hinsman, Luke Montgomery, Josh Padilla, Gabe Van Sickle, guys that sure maybe weren't always spectacular and playing their absolute best and frankly 100% healthy during 2025 season, but also you expect a lot of those guys to take a next step, but you trust that a Gabe Van Sickle or Josh Padilla takes a next step more than you trust going to get someone from the portal and expecting them to also make a next step, because there's not really a guy out there, again, outside of Jordan Seaton, where you say he's coming into Ohio State and he doesn't have to get any better. He's just fine the way he is. Like, everyone you would possibly add, you're saying, okay, there's a step forward that they have to take in their game. Okay, well then I'll trust Josh Padilla, who's been in the system and showed us against Miami what he can be, more than I trust another guy who I would also have to develop and train when he got to Ohio State. So I just don't think where they are right now is The offensive line is not something that they necessarily have to go after. I think last year was a totally different conversation. You lost a lot on your offensive line, especially at tackle. And it felt like you had to go get a Philip Daniels and an Ethan Owinyawa. And guess what? Philip Daniels ended up starting for you because like you needed him. So I just don't think they're in a spot right now. And if offensive line is a position where you'd prefer not to rely on the portal, okay, you don't have to this year. So I get it. Like the way the season ended and them giving up all those sacks to Indiana and Miami, that might not make it necessarily appealing to hear that a bunch of guys from that unit are coming back. But if you were to get guys out of the portal, it would be a lot of the same thing of needing guys to develop and take a step forward. And at that point, I'm trusting what I have more than anything I could get out of the portal. It's not a world you want to live in if you don't have to. And I think Ohio State's looking at their offensive line saying we're okay. On top of which, you're bringing in, what is it, Gillis? Is it 4 or 5 offensive linemen that they signed in this 5? And Sam Greer is one of the guys who, we're very high on what he can do. And Carter Lowe, you want him to take a step. I wouldn't stress too much about Ohio State not necessarily leaning on the portal. Again, maybe a guy or two just in terms of depth, but like second string is the best I think you would go after right now in the transfer portal.
Yeah, like if you can guarantee yourself a Jordan Seaton type player, that's fine. But Jordan Seaton is a unicorn.
Yeah, that's like it's its own conversation. It's its own conversation.
Yeah,
like it's like when Caleb Downs hopped in the portal,
right? If a guy I don't know, we'll get to the linebacker room. You're feeling okay about what you got at linebacker. Okay, if Arvell Reese is in the transfer portal, go get that guy.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
And like that's the other thing. It's like dudes like that simply don't enter the portal. Like you hear, like this is an NFL thing all the time where it's like your team, whoever you root for, drafts a first round tackle or guard. It's like cool. It might not be the flashy pick, but you're like cool because everybody needs linemen all the time. But the problem here is if the name of the game is in this portal is, well, Indiana's really old, so we have to get really old too. And Michigan was really old, so we have to get really old too. And everybody has to get really old. Carson Hinsman's a 5th-year guy. Luke Montgomery's about to be these are about to be, by the way. Hinsman 5th, Montgomery 4th, Daniels 4th, Josh Padilla 4th, Austin Sareveld 4th. Those are 5 guys that are entering their 4th or 5th year of college football. Deontay Armstrong, 3rd year. Ian Moore, 3rd year. Gabe Van Sickle, 3rd year. That's 8 guys that are about to enter their 3rd, 4th, or 5th year of college football. And you mentioned Sam Greer, Stefan. Like, that's somebody that I think the way that Ohio State talks about him maybe can be ready to take a jump. Even like a guy like Carter Lowe. Like, I don't know, he's a top 50, top 60, top whatever it ended up being. They move him around a lot. They move him around after they already show up on campus, which pisses me off. But like, Carter Lowe, 2nd-year guy, elite blue chip tackle. Would it stun you if he takes a leap and is competing for a starting job? It probably should not. So it's like, if you're going to add somebody out of the portal, one, you probably need to be okay with like, hey, if we add a guard, Gabe Van Sickle might leave. But you'd be okay with that because you're adding a locked-in, this guy can be a 2nd-round guard, 1st-round guard if he has a great year type of player. Like, you're just... The whole idea of, well, we pay for proven production doesn't really jive with me because 1, there's not really a lot of those guys out there. And 2, the dudes that you would want, what benefit would there be to being, to exchanging a Josh Padilla who's entering his 4th year for a guy who played 4 years at Virginia or a guy who played 4 years at whatever and maybe was like an all ACC player. It's like, do you think that's a better player than Josh Padilla? Maybe. But you have to be certain if you are going to let Josh Padilla or somebody like that, say, hey, like this is just what's happening. We're bringing in this guard for X amount of 7-figure deal. So you've got to be certain about that. And like, Stefan, how many times have you watched an Indiana football game or we watched an Indiana football game and they've said, Pat Coogan, the Indiana or the Notre Dame transfer who came into Indiana as an experienced 5th-year player with national title game experience. Every single one of these guys like was a part of a national championship. Every single one of these guys was a part of a Big Ten championship game. Every single one of these guys has been a part of college football for a handful of seasons. So it's like, there is not that like player that you can go get that revitalizes a room. Like everybody, like Pat Coogan was the Rose Bowl offensive MVP. And he's like, wow, look at what he added to that room up the middle. Wow, this is crazy. Look at how great he was for this team. That's not going to exist because you think those guys are on your team already. So that is why I've said that Tyler Bowen might be the most important person in the building for Ohio State in terms of building and developing a roster for 2026 because of the players that you have on the team. They're what you got. I don't think you're getting better with the portal locked in, guaranteed. Hey, if we go get this dude, it's an immediate improvement. I don't know if that's a locked in positive. unless it's Jordan Seaton, and everybody else is a question mark.
Again, and as I've pointed out on our pods a few times in the past couple weeks, Pat Coogan's name also gets brought up a lot. 4 of the 5 starters on Indiana's offensive line are Indiana recruits from Tom Allen's era. So it's like even Indiana, who's done so much in the transfer portal and gotten its roster to a place where they're playing for a national championship on Monday, they also took it upon themselves to develop the offensive lineman that they had. Zen Michalski is not starting at Indiana. He had to because of some injuries earlier this year. He ain't starting at Indiana.
I mean, Caden Curry was having a field day with him in the Big Ten championship game. But also, is that your way of telling Tom Allen, thank you?
Maybe this hasn't been brought up on this pod. I'm in Indiana circles, I'm a Tom Allen defender, and it's a tough war to win sometimes.
Okay, never mind. We're moving forward.
He had an 8-win season, and he had that COVID year in Indiana. That was like the best coaching stretch in Indiana football history. That was the best 2-year stretch in Indiana history until Kurt Signetti came along.
Remember back in 2020, we're looking at Indiana like, okay, Tom Allen's about to turn the page here. Nah, they just had a good little run here.
Some coaches adapted to NIL and the transfer portal better than others.
Yeah, Tom Allen, Dabo Sweeney, in lockstep, and Dabo hired him. Okay, for the record, Tegra Shabola is ranked per 247 Sports Composite in the transfer portal as the 11th best offensive lineman in the portal. So that idea of, as I get it, he's on your team, so you were frustrated by things they were doing. I guarantee you that if like Austin Saraveld, Luke Montgomery, Phillip Daniels, Josh Padilla, Carson Hinsman, Ian Moore, Gabe Van Sickle, Jake Cook, if they hopped in the portal like right now, they would all be in the top 30 amongst offensive linemen in the transfer portal. So
how many offensive linemen are you getting that have like 1,500 probably snaps at the college level as a starter? That's where we're at.
Yeah, and I do think there's a balance to that too, because I think I don't want to go so overboard with it. As a person who has been talking production over potential the last 2 weeks, in terms of that's the approach that's happening here. There's also a proof of concept with it, right? I think with Tegra Shabola leaving, there was kind of like, okay, yes, there was a lot of production, there was a lot of experience there, but it was also proof of concept of like, okay, there's a ceiling here. It's probably time to move on. But you're moving on to somebody else who is still in your position room versus trying to go move on with somebody who was in the portal to try to fix a patch. Okay, that's offensive side that we just spent 50 minutes talking about, but there's more offensive position groups than there are defensive position groups. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to flip over to the defensive side where there's been more additions, but there's also been a lot of subtractions here. We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We're running through what they've added and what they've lost in the transfer portal, and what do we think of the trade-offs so far. We talked offense, and now it's time to talk defense. Get the text, 614-350-3315. It's been a fun week to be a part of the text servers. We're texting a lot. We're getting the texters involved a lot. It's a lot happening. There's no bad window. I keep telling y'all, no bad window. It's just a good window right now because you got 2 weeks of portal stuff. And the portal's going to close, and then you're going to get 2 weeks of coaching staff stuff because Ryan Day still has to go find an offensive coordinator. And while we all think Matt Patricia is coming back, has anybody made that official yet? Probably not. Granted, the coaching conferences out in Vegas were earlier this week, so that's like a good place to do a lot of that stuff anyway. And as I told people on the Rants pod yesterday, Matt Patricia did not get hired at Ohio State until February 12th. It is January 15th as you are listening to this podcast. So if this were a year ago, you'd still be a little less than a month away from Matt Patricia being hired as Ohio State's defensive coordinator. So if that tells you anything about how Ryan Day might handle this, he is in no rush to make a decision, especially because the NFL season is still going on. The NFL coaching carousel just opened up like a week ago. So it's like there's a lot of moving parts here. This is probably going to be an NFL guy. You're probably trying to see where you can get in with guys. So, okay, let's talk defense. Let's start with defensive end. You lost 3 guys. You lose C.J. Hicks, former 5-star linebacker who transitioned to defensive end this past season and then took a red shirt. He is now headed to South Florida to follow Brian Hartline. You lost Logan George, who transferred in from Idaho State and then spent the entire year on the availability report. He is now headed to Washington. You lost Josh Mickens, who in a lot of ways was kind of like a consolatory prize in that 2023 recruiting class when you lost out on Keon Keeley, who flipped from Notre Dame to Bama, which is ironic because now he's back at Notre Dame as a transfer. You lost out on Damon Wilson, who committed to Georgia and then ended up transferring to Missouri, and now he's back in the transfer portal. And you lost out on Mateo Uyunglele, who ended up committing to Oregon and is still at Oregon. So he's the only one who stayed put. So you end up with Josh Mickens as a guy who was maybe, I think if he was arriving right now, he'd be an intriguing prospect because the idea of what like the hybrid defensive end, outside linebacker, edge position might end up being at Ohio State we'd have proof of concept with what Arvell Reese did. But back in 23, when it was still Jim Knowles, we didn't necessarily have that proof of concept. And you replace him with former highly rated Alabama commit Kua Rasa as a guy who is essentially Arvell Reese is leaving. Arvell Reese is coming into the program. I think, Stefan, this is about as good as a 1-for-3 trade-off as you could have gotten in the transfer portal. Because you got, sure, CJ Hicks was a former 5-star, but it never really turned into anything, and he's going to USF. Logan George never did anything for you, and now he's going to Washington. We'll see where Josh Mickens ends up. But Kua Rasa is kind of proof of concept, and he's a highly rated recruit, and he does a thing that you just showed, hey, if you're good enough, we can turn you into a top 20 draft pick if you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're Matt Patricia, I think we're seeing kind of as we go into this portal cycle as a whole, Matt Patricia's, real fingerprints on, the roster construction. I think we're especially when we start talking about safety, we're going to see that, and maybe even at defensive tackle, we see that a little bit. But you saw last year the way Matt Patricia wants to use Arvell Reese and kind of that, linebacker slash edge role and the different things that you want to implement. I think so. It's Kua Rushaw. Is that what we decided?
I think it's what it is.
It's Qua.
Okay. We are going to get that correct.
Yes.
That's the challenge. The next time we say his name on this podcast, we are going to have that down.
Yes. But he is, he battled some injury as well in the 2025 season. I think he got hurt in that win they had against Georgia in the regular season and didn't come back until I think the second to last week of the regular season. So he missed some time too, which obviously doesn't help, but you could kind of see, flashes of what exactly, he is as a player and how that fits into what Ohio State did with Arvell Reese. And I think, when you look at the guys that were in the portal, I think Chaz Coleman is obviously the popular name that came up and linking him back to Ohio State and all that kind of stuff. I think you're getting another player here who is maybe even a cheaper version of that, who can step in and do some of those things. Who, I get it, Chaz Coleman, it was one of the hot names in the portal. I mean, Rousseau had about just as much production and missed a good chunk of the season in 2025. So if we're talking production over potential, there's an element to Rousseau here that you have to like what you saw in his, limited abilities with Alabama in 2025, or limited opportunities, I should say, with Alabama in 2025. So yeah, I'm a fan of this pickup. I think it's going to be pretty fun watching Matt Patricia, move him around and use him. And I will say, I'm cheating a little bit here because I know we're going to talk about linebackers later. I do think Christian Allegro, the linebacker that they got from Wisconsin, is going to play a decent amount on the edge for Ohio State as well. He had 4 sacks last year in 10 games. So that's another guy to kind of keep your eye on. If we're talking pass rush in this kind of edge role, Allegro has to probably figure into that conversation a bit as well. So yeah, I think they've won so far in the portal with defensive end / edge. And then, of course, as you're listening to this, you've probably got an answer on whether Kenyatta Jackson's coming back.
Yeah, I think in terms of, kind of what you lost, you definitely lost some depth there. But I think if you were to look at it, I'm not sure if it's Quay or Qua. I'll say Rousseau for now. Jackson, Zion Grady, Rousseau, Bo Atkinson. I don't know. That feels like a solid 1 through 4. That feels like a decent edge rushing group, especially, when you talk about somebody who's like Kari Wilder, where Ryan Day said on signing day, he is a day one contributor for us. So maybe day one contributor means we play him against Ball State. He doesn't play against Texas. And then you kind of ease him in after September, when he starts playing a little bit like that Edric role where it's like, hey, 10, 15 snaps, he's out there. Hey, he second series of the game against Northwestern and he's in the game in, late September, early October, maybe something like that. But yeah, this to me is, I think, a decent defensive end room. I don't know what, I think they did what they could. They did what they had to in the portal. Again, if Kenyatta comes back, but this is a position where you are going to need some guys to take a step. I think Atkinson is one of them. Kenyatta, you probably need to be a little bit more consistent. Steven, we were talking about Atkinson. I saw him kind of working out and I looked at you and I went, that's a guy who needed to be here in the winter to be with Ohio State's strength and conditioning program. If he can fill out a little bit more, you probably feel better about him stopping the runs. Like those 4 guys, I'm Grady maybe taking a step. I think you need people to take a step with that, with adding Rousseau. I think you feel decent about that 1 through 4.
I think they should make Bo Atkinson eat a lot of food over the next 6 months and turn him into a 3-tech. He doesn't have the bend and the athleticism, get around the edge that you need to do here. And that's part of the reason why. I think he's a good football player, but when you don't have that kind of athleticism, I mean, you can get away with that in the ACC, which is why he had 7.5 sacks at North Carolina. I don't think that's going to be the case here, which is why we saw him on the inside at times when they would go with the 3 out down lineman. Look, I think if you just put 30 pounds on him and turn him into a 3-tech, I think you're fine. I mean, they're fine from a depth standpoint. I think we're all assuming Kenyatta Jackson is coming back. I mean, you got 8 with Kenyatta, Atkinson, Zion Grady, Kua Rashaw, Epi Satanale, Kari Wilder, Braxton Rimbert, and Drake Quinn. And if Rimbert and Drake Quinn are the only 2 of that group where you're like, okay, maybe they're not big-time contributors in 2026, okay, fine. Kari Wilder, I don't know, we might be looking back on his high school career and going, how was he not a 5-star recruit across the board? Epi Satanale is going through his first spring, and he flashed at times in fall camp last year. Maybe he takes a step. Zion Grady's season, I'm trying to decide who I'm going to drive my bus for this year.
You have some time.
I know.
You don't have to come up with the answer tomorrow.
No, I don't. I already have my options, though, and Zion Grady is high on that list, boy. Yeah. That boy is going to be good. So, okay, so sure, maybe Bo Atkinson takes a step, but I think Zion Grady is already actively taking the step because there's a lot of guys in his recruiting class who were top 100 recruits that were going, okay, this guy might be a starter in 2026. And a lot of those guys are already in the portal. He ain't one of them. In a world where Larry Johnson is actively revamping his defensive line room with portal guys, and I know a lot of those guys are interior, we'll get to them in a minute, Zion Grady's still on the roster. So unless between us recording this and sometime Friday, something has drastically changed, I think Zion Grady starting week 1 ain't that shocking to me, to be frank about it. So, like, Bo Atkinson take the step or not. I think a top 3 of Kenyatta Jackson, Rashaw, and Grady, and then you got Atkinson and Santanale as depth pieces with Kari Wilder developing in the background as a guy who can help you if you need it as the season progresses. I don't know, man. I think that's a pretty good defensive end room.
Yeah, that
got a good sprinkle of Rashaw as proof of concept. Atkinson's played enough football to at least have experience, even if he's not nearly as good as you thought he was going to be. And Kenyatta Jackson played a lot of football. It's enough proof of concept with a sprinkle of potential that you can wrap your mind around it. And I'm fine. I think they're fine with that when it was the other way around of not a lot of proof of concept and a lot of potential. I think this is a fine balance of a defensive end room. If you got 8 guys, 2 developing, maybe they hit, maybe they're in the portal in 12 months. Either way, it's fine. 2 more guys in Epi and Wilder where it's like, hey, if this hits, well, yeah, we got something. 2 more guys in Rashaw and Grady where it's like they're highly rated dudes who have already shown you enough that if you just give them more opportunity, they're going to pop. And then 2 more guys in Kenyatta and Atkinson who have done enough in college football that you can at least rely on them.
I think if you were, I think it's solid. I think Kenyatta, like maybe this is moot, so I don't want to go too long on it. I think if Kenyatta were to go, this room would be in a really, really bad place.
I don't agree.
I think it would. Because like I think Atkinson can be fine. I think Rousseau can be fine. I think Grady's, I think Grady's upside is obviously really, really high, but I don't know if you have that like, whoa, dude locked in. I think Kenyatta has that like upside. He's a 5th-year guy at this point. Like I think Kenyatta and Grady with Atkinson and Rousseau off the bench is much, much more intriguing than Grady and Atkinson or Grady and Rousseau, and then one of those guys off the bench, and then you're relying on, Wilder or Satanale, or you bump down Allegro. Like I think Kenyatta was probably, and again, I don't want to go too deep on it because maybe you guys already know as you're listening to this, that was probably the most consequential NFL draft decision that this team was going to have the entire cycle.
I think if Ohio State has a 10-sack guy next year, it's going to be Rousseau or Grady. That's what I think.
How would you, I know we're going to do this next week, so I'm spoiling a little, but give me your starting defensive line when we're done talking about defensive tackles.
They lost Jarquez Carter, who's headed to Miami, Axel Roy, who's headed to UCLA, Eric Mensah, who's headed to Virginia Tech. He's actually from that area. Dominic Kirks, who they once flipped from Washington. He is now on the transfer portal. He hasn't found a new home yet. And then Trajan Odom, as of the time of recording this, is the most recent attrition piece of Ohio State's transfer portal group. 3 of those 5 were from the 2025 recruiting class. And so, like, you're almost going like, man, like, how did that class fall apart that quickly? Okay, so far they've already replaced him with James Smith from Alabama, who was kind of a package deal with Rousseau. I think they were a package deal coming out of high school too. So they've just been kind of
they played high school football together.
Okay, so they've just been, and they probably played Pop Warner football together and middle school football together and Little League. They've probably just been together, and everywhere they go, they're just going to be together. And they're probably going to tell whatever team that drafts them, you better draft him too, or I'm not coming. So that's just how it's going to go. They're going to go to the Hall of Fame together. They're just going to do everything together. I think it's cool when it works out like that. It's because it typically doesn't work out like that. And then they added John Walker, who they once recruited, ended up at UCF, and now he's coming in. I think, again, sure, you lost 5, and sure, your entire recruiting class blew up, but I don't think this is, it blew up and now we're reacting. I think this was, we're pivoting. Instead of relying on a bunch of guys who maybe might turn into something, they went and got 2 guys who they know can turn into something. And I think they need to add at least probably one more interior guy, because right now the room is Edric Houston, John Walker, James Smith, Will Smith Jr., Jason Moore, and then a bunch of freshmen, Damari Simeon, Emmanuel Ruffin, Darius McKinley, and Jameer Perez. I think if you can get one more older guy, even if it's a 10-man room, I think that's a really good. I think Larry Johnson knocked it out the park with the portal this year.
Yeah, we joked about it earlier this offseason when Ohio State started having some of these. I think John Walker was the first on the defensive line to commit, and then you started getting some of these other guys to come in, and we're like, I don't know, man. People keep asking Larry Johnson to retire, and Larry Johnson keeps adapting to college football, right? Like last year, Ryan Day talked a lot about how Matt Patricia coming in and the style of defense that they wanted to run, and losing all 4 starting defensive linemen was a new test, a new challenge, a new opportunity for Larry Johnson to keep learning, even in this stage of his career. And Larry Johnson was really excited about that. And now it's like, all right, you throw the current portal and NIL era at him. It's like, I don't know, Larry Johnson keeps adapting to it. And yeah, sure, they lost their entire defensive tackle recruiting class from last year. Okay, Larry Johnson went out and got John Walker, who's a 300-pounder to put at nose tackle. And he went and got James Smith, who's a 300-pounder to play alongside Edric Houston, who Ohio State retained. And you talk about Will Smith Jr. coming back. It's like that top 4 of defensive tackle. If last year we were going to come in with the energy of like, I don't know what Ohio State has behind Edric Houston and Caden McDonald, we better be coming in with the opposite energy this year, where they're like, that top 4 is really damn good, with guys who have either proven it at a power conference level or have played a good amount of snaps at a power conference level, right? Because I guess I wouldn't say Will Smith Jr. has proven it, but if his role is going to be the backup behind John Walker, well, he's shown you that he can do that because he just did it behind Caden McDonald.
Yeah.
If Edric Houston, his role is going to be to play alongside James Smith, okay, well, he just played alongside Tywone Malone. Mm-hmm. And now on top of that, we're saying, okay, what if Edric and Will Smith Jr. take even another step forward, which you would expect? So yeah, defensive tackle, they've knocked it out of the park. Again, kind of like I was talking about with offensive line, if you go out and get one more body for the sake of having more bodies in that room, I don't think it's a bad idea, right? You find kind of a specific type of guy to do that for you, someone who knows that he's probably not going to play a whole ton of meaningful snaps for you. But also, if you don't get a guy, I don't think it's the end of the world. So I think they're pretty good at defensive tackle. I would definitely say a net positive in terms of what they've done in the portal with this unit.
I think it's a net positive too. I think the counter is you would definitely like to have one of those guys back. We talked about this with we wrote about this and we texted about this. All your 2025 defensive tackles are now gone. You would probably like to have somebody that, can maybe take that step as a 5th or 6th defensive lineman. You mentioned Smith, Houston, Moore, and then you add Smith and Walker out of the portal. Those are veteran guys. And I think the emphasis was definitely put on space eaters. John Walker's run defense grade and per PFF at UCF in 2025. He missed the 24 season with a meniscus injury. His run defense grade was really, really good. It was at 79. James Smith was down in 2025. He was at 62.1 as a run defense grade. That's not that great, but the previous 2 years he was at a 76 and then he was at a 72.8. So you got 2 guys that are going to come in above 300 pounds or right at 300 pounds and take on blocks and kind of fill that type of nose role. You're not getting any pass rush out of these guys. These are not pass rushing, let's get after the quarterback defensive tackles. That is where you were going to have to rely on Edric Houston and Will Smith Jr. and, maybe 4th year Jason Moore. I don't know. He's still here. But I think it's a net positive, but I am not as, I would say, bullish on they knocked it out of the park. It's probably they got on base and it's probably an extra base hit, but I wouldn't say that it's, oh, wow, this was just a bang up job by Ohio State. I think you'd probably like to have a little bit more depth there.
You got 5 people.
Yeah, I think you would like to have 6. Like you were saying, I think you would like to have another guy in that room. I
Yeah,
think you
but
would like to hang on to Carter or Mensa or Odom or
they didn't
Roy.
want to hang. Right. They didn't want to do it.
Then go get somebody else. Then go find another guy that you can kind of have in that rotation as well.
I mean, they played 4 this year, and they were perfectly fine. I don't know if 6 is reasonable anymore because you're just not going to have the depth that they used to have.
I was going to ask if it's even reasonable to think in this era that like keeping a Jarquez Carter for the role that you were going to like.
No,
I don't think he was ever going to stick around for that.
So like,
and I don't blame him for it either.
No,
it's tough. It's kind of like what I was saying with receiver earlier, where it's like, yeah, you'd like to have a little more depth, but then Steven, you pointed out, it's like, is that like, I don't know, is it reasonable to ask a Mylan Graham to stay if he's not going to have a starting role? It's probably not. You kind of have to adjust your expectations, I guess.
It's not reasonable to ask Mylan Graham to stick around. And it's not reasonable to ask Ohio State to pay him to not start. So like, I don't know, like in a world where last year you had 4, now you have 5, and that depends on Jason Moore. Okay, so essentially what you did was replace Tywan Malone and Caden McDonald. It's like, okay, well, these guys aren't as good as Caden McDonald. Okay, Caden McDonald wasn't as good as Caden McDonald last year. Like nobody 12 months ago was saying Caden McDonald was going to be the best defensive lineman in the Big Ten. So for what they needed, I think they got it. And that's what I mean by knocked out. We'll see if they're good football players or not, but you call them space eaters, Gillis. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. John Walker is 6'4", 324. James Smith is 6'3", 297, and he'll probably put more weight on once he gets up here. But you're seeing the blueprint of what Matt Patricia wants. I mean, if you go look at those Patriots defenses, like Vince Wilfork was the guy in the middle of all that. They want the big dudes who can just eat up space. Great football player.
That Vince Wilfork was a football player. If you ask me what is a football player, I'm not showing you Jerry Rice, Tom Brady, or Barry Sanders. No. I'm showing you Vince Wilfork.
But here's the thing. I'm not showing you Vince Wilfork football highlights. I'm showing you the Vince Wilfork highlights from Hard Knocks.
Yep.
When he walks in with nothing on but the overalls and the cowboy hat, and he goes, "Gotta compete. Gotta compete today." And like his very deep voice, he's like all about competing. Somebody's like, "You ain't got no underoos on." He's like, "Nope." That's a football player.
The fact that guy is a better athlete than 80% of America. I remember once Travion Henderson and DeJuan Jones were like doing media after a game. And Bill, I don't know if Bill remembers, but we're standing next to each other. He goes, "You know what I love about football? Those two play the same sport." And it's like, yeah, like that's Vince Wilfork. That's what they want, though. They want the big gap spacing man, like space eating, run stopping defensive tackles. Imagine Caden McDonald, but instead of being 6'1", 330, he's 6'4", 330.
And they just brought in Jameer Perez with their freshman class too.
And he's the same.
If I had to guess, is like 6'4", 350. Yeah, and he's got to drop some weight.
Sure, he's got to it's got to be good weight. Right now, he's just got bad because he's a high school kid. And he's been eating whatever he wants to eat because he's 17 years old. But that's what they want. And so they don't need to be pass rushers. That's what Kenyatta Jackson and Zion Grady and Kira Rasaw and Kari Walder and Epi Satanale and what Christian Allegrio and all, that's what they're for. You guys go get the quarterback. Your job is to make sure nobody can run the football. Caden McDonald did it pretty well. So that's why I thought they knocked it out the park. They got exactly what they needed out of the portal. And sure, you lost some pieces, but you're not holding on to those pieces in 2026 anymore. Nobody is. Nobody has depth. That's kind of the point now. So it's like the NFL. 53-man rosters in the NFL. Not saying that college football is headed in a 53-man roster situation, but they're not going to have 105 people. And you're not paying all of them. So I'll answer your question now, Stefan. Day one starters, again, are we saying Texas? Because like the Ball State game is like not.
Yeah, let's say Texas.
For the sake of this conversation.
Give me how you would label the positions too.
Okay. Yeah, this is fun. I would say John Walker at nose, Education at 3 tech, with Smith behind him and James Smith behind Walker and Will Smith Jr. behind John Walker. And I would say, and this is assuming Kenyatta's coming back, which is what the assumption we're going to go under. And I know that news is not out as we are doing this pod, but more than likely it'll be out by the time you hear this because this is the deadline day to do this on Wednesday. Kenyatta, defensive end, and I'll go Rasaw edge with Bo behind Kenyatta, Zion behind Rasaw as like a base defense. And we can talk like third and long lineup next week when we do the projections and stuff. But like I think that's what it'll be. And all 8 of those guys will play.
Yes. I like that.
Do you think? I mean, do you think they'll extend it to 9 with Jason Moore? Like, do you think Jason will they go that deep at defensive tackle?
If he's good enough, I don't think they have to. If he's good
Well,
enough,
that's why I didn't ask you if he's good enough. I asked you if they will.
yeah, but if he's not good enough, they're not just going to do it for the sake of.
Well, they're not going to do it, right? But like, I'm asking, do you think he's good enough to factor into that rotation?
I'm not going to say that in January.
I mean, would you have considered him their 5th defensive tackle this year?
Yes, and he barely played.
Yeah,
when he was healthy.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So no, right now. And how about this? In January, I'm going to say no. If we get through the spring and you ask me that question,
you might have a different answer.
Yeah. Potentially. I'll say this. I won't just say no the way I'm saying no right now.
Sure.
My answer is either going to be, okay, yeah, I'm open to, sure, 5-man rotation. Yeah. That's a pleasant surprise. Or I am like, no. In fact, if there was a spring portal, I think we'd be having conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I had to do my 4, I would say Kenyatta and Zion. I think those are my 2 defensive ends. I think Grady starts. Like I think they think that highly of him. I'm actually on a different wavelength. I think your defensive tackles are James Smith and Edric Houston. I think that's your starting front 4.
You realize they play the same position, right? They're both 3 techs.
I think Smith is going to be at nose, as I understand it. Like I think Smith is going to be their big boy up front, where he's going to play as a 1 tech, and then you have Walker behind him, and then I think that's how they're going to rotate. So I think it's going to be Smith, Houston, Jackson, Grady. Sorry, James Smith, not Will Smith.
For the record, James Smith played 15 snaps at nose last year.
Is that what he did?
Yes.
I had the PFF page up earlier. Maybe I read that wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, James Smith won't be our nose.
No. He's
we're doing the depth chart pod next week.
So we'll do that later.
Man. What do you think? Not playing though. No, but you got a 330 in there. Okay, linebacker. They lost Ty Howard, who is the brother of Bo Jackson, who also came in from, I forget the school he came in from, but he was here for, I think, a year, and they brought in Christian Allegrio from Wisconsin, who has a lot of snaps. Let's have a short conversation about this, because we are doing a depth chart one next week. I think, Stefan, you were just asking me that just to see where my head was at going into that. In the world of what we saw this year from Ohio State's defense, how many linebackers of the top of the group? Here's the linebackers right now. Christian Allegrio, Peyton Pierce, Garrett Stover, Riley Pettijohn, TJ Alford, Eli Lee, Sincere Johnson, and CJ Santa. The 3 freshmen are freshmen, so they're not part of this equation right now. Can Sincere Johnson become a part of the equation? Sure. I think bringing in Allegrio takes the pressure off of Sincere Johnson needing to be a part of the conversation in year 1. So let's just go Allegrio, Peyton Pierce, Garrett Stover, Riley Pettijohn, TJ Alford. Very quick answers. You're going to put them in 1 or 2 hats. There's the Sonny Styles hat, and there's the Arvell Reese hat. The Sonny Styles hat is I do linebacker stuff 85% of the time. The Arvell Reese hat is I do linebacker stuff, and on 3rd down, I turn into a man-eating pass rusher. Those are your hats. Very quick answers. Christian Allegrio, Stefan, which hat is he?
Probably the Arvell Reese hat.
Okay. Gillis? Okay. Peyton Pierce? Gillis?
Sonny.
Okay. You agree, Stefan?
Sonny.
Okay. Garrett Stover?
Sonny.
Okay. We'll get into why you paused next week. Riley Pettijohn?
Probably he's definitely the most in between the 2.
Yeah. He's the one where I was hoping Stefan was going to answer first.
That's where I'm so interested in this, because I do feel like with Peyton Pierce and Riley Pettijohn, they both have a little bit of Sonny in them. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm interested to see where Allegro fills into this, because I think he's the one in the group that has the most Arvell to him.
Okay, so toss up.
This is also very, very unfair to compare them to those 2 guys, because they both might hear their name called in the first round, but like there's only 2 buckets.
Yeah, this is not about are they going to be as good as those guys. It's just like play style, and that's the thing. Comparisons have become so annoying because people think, oh, you're supposed to be as good as that guy. No, it's just like you have a similar play style and how they may use you. That doesn't mean you're going to be as effective as that guy is. Bodpin Miller, if you had to say, hey, what's his play style bucket? It's probably Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith. Is he going to be as good at that play style as Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith? Probably not. Doesn't mean that it's not a similar play style. TJ Alford.
I went first last time, Gillis. You go. You don't know.
You can't say I went first last time, and then when you get called, I go, I don't know.
I'll say Arvell.
I don't know an acceptable answer because I don't know.
I'll say Arvell.
So here's how I'd do it. Allegrio, Alford, Arvell. And Sincere is obviously Arvell. Peyton Pierce, Garrett Stover, Eli Lee, CJ Santa, Sonny Styles. Riley Pettijohn can do both. And we'll break that down even more next week when we do our depth chart conversations. 1-2 cornerback. You lose Aaron Scott, 5-star recruit, who was here for 2 years and is now on the transfer portal. Bryce West, top 100 recruit, was here for 2 years and has since transferred to Wisconsin. And Bakari Miles, who's another guy who, because you're at 105, everybody's on scholarship, but he is a walk-on by that standpoint. I put Earl Little here just because I put Bryce West here because like they're kind of the same. They're both going to play in that nickel role. This is a guy who was all ACC at Florida State. So here's what you have in terms of corners and nickels as of right now at the time we're recording this, and maybe they're not done at corner. We'll see what happens. Maybe that decision has already been made by the time you listen to this, but I'm just not going to spoil it. Tremaine Matthews, Devin Sanchez, Jordan Woods, Jay Timmons, and Jordan Thomas on the outside, though I know Jay Timmons can also do some stuff on the inside. But if they continue to do things how they've been doing them, they'll probably start him on the outside, have him learn that stuff, and then they'll move him around there where they want to put him. And on the inside, you've got Earl Little, Miles Lockhart, and Kamari Bing, the true freshman. What do we think, Stefan, of the trade-off? You lost Aaron Scott, you lost Bryce West, and you lost Bakari Mitch Miles, and you add in Earl Little, and you already knew who your starting cornerbacks were for 2026.
I like it. I think it's an okay trade-off.
Okay.
I think you lose maybe a little bit of ceiling and potential, but again, that's fine. We're like, as we did, Stephen, when we did our big podcast for what to think of the portal and everything, and this kind of this a little bit of a State of the Union address that we did.
Yeah.
It felt like we said like you kind of have to look at it season by season, and I think when you look at 2026 season, having Earl Little Jr. in there along with Jermaine Matthews and Devin Sanchez is better than having Jermaine, Devin with Bryce and Aaron Scott kind of as a backup there at the corner room. So I think it's good. I think bringing in Earl Little Jr. is good, and all ACC type guy. I think he's a great player. I like the different ways that they can kind of move him around. Like Lorenzo is probably the best comp in terms of the way that they're going to use him because he can kind of float to safety a little bit for you. But I think Nicola is primarily where you're going to see him. Didn't have the best coverage grades last year. Looking through some of the PFF stuff, which you always kind of take that with a grain of salt. But I like what they got there. You went from young with potential to old with production, and considering what you get back, I think you're okay with that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I have questions about the slot position, and I am a little worried about what that's going to look like. Little played 65 snaps at slot corner last year, so I don't know, like we were talking about, the slot position kind of being a worry for Ohio State this year with Lorenzo kind of doing that. I don't know if you have, like if you went out and got somebody that you feel better about, I'm not ready to say that right now. I think you feel really solid about him as a player, and I think he's a better maybe overall football player, but the snaps like aren't really there in spades in 2025, at least, to make you say like, oh, like this is, a lockdown. We know this guy is going to play in the slot really, really well. So I have questions about slot. You would have liked to see a Bryce West or Aaron Scott stay.
Why do you think?
Realities
Can I
are
ask you a question? Because you keep saying that now, you would have liked to see them stay.
Yeah,
that's not reality anymore.
Well, the reality is also that they lost like they were the most heavily not gutted, but they lost some of the more. They had some of the most losses of any team in college football that did not have a coaching change.
Is that true?
Like Penn State and Virginia Tech
lost 25 people in the portal.
Yeah, Ohio State lost more.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like Ohio State did lose more than
sure, but okay, that's fine. You've said this a couple of times. If you would have liked, is that reality anymore?
It's not reality to keep everybody.
Right. Is it a reality to ask Aaron Scott to come be a backup for you getting into year 3?
Maybe. I don't know. Is it reality to keep Bryce West, an Ohio kid, around? Like an Ohio kid that you maybe he can play for a starting spot?
Maybe.
And those conversations are what they are. We don't necessarily
I'm
know.
asking you now. You are Bryce West.
Yeah.
There is no spring portal. So if you stay here, you are stuck here if you don't win the job. Are you staying? If it is not a guarantee that you are going to be the starter, and if you don't win the job, you are now stuck here for another 12 months. Are you staying?
I think it depends on what the conversation is with Ohio State, but like I think that he could probably have contended for a starting spot. I just
told you. Here's the conversation. You are Bryce West. You are heading into your 3rd year. You have been a backup for 2 years, and you ask me flat out as your position coach, "Hey, is this my job in 2026?" Knowing that there is no portal window, and so if you do not have a guaranteed spot and you don't win it, you are stuck here sitting the bench for another 12 months. And I don't say to you, yes, it's your job. I say, maybe, but we're also bringing in another guy. Are you sticking around to maybe win a job when Wisconsin is offering you more money?
Yes.
when Wisconsin is offering you more money and you're going to be a guaranteed starter?
Yeah, like, again, it depends on the conversation that you had, but I don't think it's unreasonable. Again, but I don't think. But you said maybe, so yeah, I think it's not unreasonable for him to have stayed. Like, I think it was more reasonable for Bryce West to stay than Aaron Scott, because if Jermaine Matthews is not going to play in the slot, Aaron Scott's not playing. Bryce West had the chance to play. Like, Bryce West, would you have been stunned if Bryce West had stayed if he was their starting nickel?
We don't. Okay,
week one and week two.
But here's the difference in the conversation we're having. You are talking as if it's his job. It's not.
I never said it was his job.
Stefan, I'll ask you the same question. You are Bryce West. I'm your position coach. You know if you can't leave after Friday, you're stuck here. And we have a man-to-man conversation of, I've been here for 2 years. I've worked my butt off. Is this job mine? 1,000%, no questions asked. And I say to you, maybe, but we're also going to bring in a guy who has actually done this before to compete with you. Are you sticking around for a maybe?
Probably not.
Okay.
Not at this point of the career.
That's the point. So, like, we can keep doing we can't do that no more. You're not going to hold on to Bryce West. You're not going to hold on to Aaron Scott. If Blaine Bradford in 2 years, Blaine Bradford might be gone next year. Who knows? Lane just left. Dudes are not sticking around for maybe just to try to compete for a job anymore. Not when there's money to be made and not when there's jobs to be had elsewhere. So we can do he's not going to. I'm telling you, he's not. It's unfortunate. It sucks that this is the world we live in now, but they're two Ohio guys who just told you, I'm not sticking around for maybe. And Ohio State just told you, we're not paying you for maybe. That's the reality. We have to live in that.
It's difficult, and there will be exceptions, right? There will be Bryce West who decide to stay at their respective programs, and that's fine. But like, we've gotten to the point where that kind of feels like the anomaly more than the expectation.
So it's not going to happen. So in that reality, I think both sides did the best they could. Bryce West found a place where he can play in the Big Ten. And maybe he turns into something. And sure, you're right, Gillis. Maybe at some point Ohio State loses a guy to a transfer portal, and we look back in hindsight and say, man, they really should have held on to that guy. That hasn't happened yet. And we can't have that conversation until next January.
I think this will be the most likely class where it happens, but it's also like there's a quantity to this that makes it comparable.
There's a better chance. But even more than last year than if we look back, if Aaron Scott ends up at I don't know, Georgia, and he turns himself into a first round draft pick, and maybe Devin Sanchez didn't take a step, then
that's the caveat, is you're also saying Devin Sanchez didn't pan out, right? You don't remember Jameson Williams because everyone else around him was
Jackson Smith-Njigba's freaking good, so it doesn't matter.
So it's you're sitting there being like, man, having Jameson Williams would have been sick. He's so fun to watch. Okay, who are you taking off? You know what I mean? So yeah, if Devin Sanchez doesn't pan out, which nothing really suggests that he won't, but if Devin Sanchez doesn't pan out, then yeah, we could sit there and be like, man, keeping Aaron Scott would have been awesome. Guess what? If Aaron Scott's the 7th overall pick and Devin Sanchez is the 8th overall pick, you're not really kicking yourself.
So I just want us to not you would have you're not going to do it. It's unfortunate. I agree with you, Gillis. I wish they would have stuck around. I wish two Ohio kids would put in.
I don't mean this to lead as a question. So are you saying the idea of depth is dead gone impossible in college football right now?
The idea of the type of depth where you're looking at a position group and going, these guys' backups could be starters somewhere else at a high level place. That does not exist. We're seeing it right now, right? How many years in a row have we gone, Ohio State's backup receivers would be a starter at X amount of programs? Okay, 2 of their backup receivers actually all 3 of them are going to be starting receivers somewhere else, with Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham at Notre Dame and Mylan Graham maybe a little bit less, but still.
Yeah, Mylan maybe not.
I guess we'll see. But the idea of for a long time has been, if you look at Georgia, if you look at Ohio State, if you look at Bama, if you look at Texas when it's healthy, is they're so good that their backups will be starters at 85% of college football. I do not think that will be true anymore. And the way the portal is working right now is backing up that concept, because we probably would have been coming into this year had Aaron Scott not beaten out Devin Sanchez and Bryce West stuck around and not beaten out Earl Little and been saying, man, Ohio State's, their 2s are pretty good. They got guys that, Bryce West is going to be a starter at Wisconsin, most likely. Wherever Aaron Scott goes, he's probably going to be a starter. That's not true anymore. The backups going forward are going to be true freshmen that you just brought in and then maybe some guy who's brought in simply for depth. But this is it. You get a guy for maybe 24 months. That's all it is. So like I just don't want people to walk away from this thinking that there was a reality where they could have held on to Aaron Scott or Bryce West. And when we talk like you wish they would have held on, as if it was their choice. Like their choice was whether or not they were going to be paying them to be backups. It was Aaron Scott and Bryce West's choice of whether or not they wanted to be paid to be backups here, when they could be paid to be starters somewhere else. And both of them chose the latter. Same thing at safety. You lose Fahim Delane, it's a tough loss. You lose Malik Hartford, it's a tough loss. You put 3 years into the dude, and now he's at UCLA. And Nelson Jr., probably not as tough of a loss. He came in from South Carolina, never played a snap for you. He was on scout team for the most of the time he was here, and you lose him, that's more of a depth loss. And so far, you've replaced him with Terry Moore, who is going to play snaps for you. What do we think? Either the floor as anybody else's. Because I feel like now we're getting dark and telling people that the world is falling apart. It's not falling apart. It's just we don't have structure.
Can I say something to lighten the mood?
Yeah.
James Laurinaitis, officially a member of the College Football Hall of Fame.
Even him! James Laurinaitis in this world would not have spent that time sitting behind A.J. Hall.
Well, he was a starter in year 2. He had 3 All-American seasons. He's a Hall of Famer.
Right. That's a little different.
He was really good at football. He's a Hall of Famer.
No, you guys are right. That's a little different.
My question, I guess, would be, if you were to say what player from Ohio State's 30 that have left, I believe it's 30. I have to check our tracker. What player from that list is most damn? They probably should have done what it took to keep that guy, whether that's maybe you're overpaying him, maybe you're, not feeling great about the money you're paying him, maybe it's you're guaranteeing him something. And my question is it Fahim Delane? That's why I wanted to wait to ask that question. Like, what is the number one? Wow, Ohio State really lost that kid, and that would have been really good to have.
Not anymore.
So what is number one then? Who is number one? Excuse me.
I don't know if there is one now.
You could probably make the case for Quincy Porter, because when he was healthy, he did show you at least glimpses of like someone who could start.
I think that's fair.
It would probably be him or Fahim.
I think it's.
In terms of like what I think this roster could use, it might be James Peoples, but
I was gonna say that. Like I think
those are probably my top 3.
I think that Quincy Porter and Fahim Delane are like super ideas. And sure, like the proof of concept of Ohio State turning 5-star receivers in the first round draft picks is they're the only one that they've had so far that didn't end up being a first round draft pick was not Brandon Ennis, but Julian Fleming. And like injuries kind of derailed his career before it ever even got off the ground. But I don't know, like, it's easy to say right now, dang, they're going to be missing Quincy Porter. What if Chris Henry Jr. is awesome? We still going to be missing Quincy Porter? Probably not. Harry Moore looked like a dude. He just got hurt. So he missed last year. But in 2024, he was a dude. So it's like, it's again, it's the idea versus proof of concept for me. I think when the Fahim Delane thing first happened, Gillis and I were in a car. We were headed back to Columbus. We went to a Cavs game on company dime. Shout out to the company. Shout out to Advanced Local. And in that moment, yeah, I was like, man, this is actually the first one where it's like, man, this is a tough loss. There's like a wide open starting job for him to have. Like, what's going on here? And I think I sent that to our texters. I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. This is the first one where I'm like, man, this is a little crazy. So here's what I think. They better already have an answer that they're looking for in the portal, or that means there's somebody else on the roster they think is already good enough that they can let Fahim Delane walk. And 24 hours later, Terry Moore committed to Ohio State. So that was the answer to it. So it's like, I don't know, like in a vacuum, sure, you look at Fahim Delane and some of this is Gillis covers recruiting. So there is an attachment he had, especially Fahim Delane. He went down to go.
I had said for months that to anybody that's long time listening, I thought that Fahim was a year 2 starter.
And I get like I think like your perspective, Gillis, is I understand the perspective. In fact, there's a lot of people who have your perspective of like, man, why couldn't you hold on to this guy? Which is why I'm coming in and just ripping the Band-Aid off of like, dude, you're not holding on to this guy. So let it go. Let go of the dream. And it sucks. But it's a necessary thing to say at this point because this is where we're at. Fahim Delane was a tough loss. And then Terry Moore became a Buckeye. And all of a sudden, Fahim Delane wasn't a tough loss anymore. In a world where, like, if they didn't go get Terry Moore, if he didn't think they were going to go get another safety, he probably would still be here. But they did. And there's one portal window. So you can't take the chance, if you're Fahim Delane, of maybe I beat this guy out. I'm not beating out Jalen McClain. That's for sure not happening. So maybe I beat out the Drew transfer. Maybe I do what Austin Saravel did to Ethan and Yawa and go, okay, you brought this guy in, so what? I'm your left tackle. More often than not beating this kid out. So I'm going to be sitting another year. I'm not sitting another year. I'm going to go find somewhere where I can get on the football field. James Peoples is mine because I think he might he's not as good as what Bo Jackson and Isaiah West are, but he is still a good running back, and he might have an element to his game that those two did not have, and we are actively saying they need to go get. I don't know if there's another one of these transfers right now where outside of the vacuum, I think Ohio State's going to end up missing them right now.
I think the more addition, second team All ACC in 24, he blew his ACL out and missed 2025. So like that is obviously a little bit of a risk. That is a position like he might be the guy that you look at in the portal and say you probably need. I think you could make a case where it's you need him or Little to be your best portal ad. I don't think that's unreasonable to suggest that you need one of those two to be hits, and you frankly probably need both of them to be hits, because there is an element I think too of, proven production is one thing. Yes, I don't have any reason to believe that Ohio State like soured on Fahim Delane and went, you know what, recruiting miss eval, didn't work out. He's not going to play at Ohio State ever. I would suggest, or I would say that, I do think there is a counter argument that's not off your rocker where it's, okay, well, you went out and paid Terry Moore, and that's reasonable. You get production, you get veteran, you get leadership, you get blah, 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 blah. We've been over that. I also think there is an element of, if you did that, you did give up potentially a 2-year starter. You knew what maybe the cascading effect of that would be, and maybe you lose a 2-year guy, and maybe you have to go do this again next year. So, there's a lot of ways to look at this. The Fahim Delane thing, I know I've been a Delane guy for a while. I just watching him play in high school and then watching that translate to Ohio State. I liked what I saw. I liked the way he moved. I liked the way he hit. I liked the aggressiveness that he had. So yeah, it's an interesting loss. I think I would probably put this number one in terms of like, it would be really beneficial to have this guy on the roster. And, yeah, I think that the Fahim Delane kind of Terry Moore swap is going to be one of the more interesting ones to look at in the 2026 season.
What do you think, Stefan?
Yeah, I like it. I like them bringing in Terry Moore. Again, it's like production over potential. Like that's clearly the approach here. And you're taking a guy who in 2024 was an all ACC type guy, right? And injuries just got in the way. So I like what they've done kind of with the secondary in its entirety. And maybe as the time you're listening, they've added another corner. We were talking about depth earlier. It's like, how do you build depth? Depth might also be the portal, right? Finding a guy out of the portal who wants to be a backup for you. Like we're talking about offensive line and defensive line, bringing in guys who want to be backups. Like you can find, former, 3-star, 4-star corners who are safeties who have played in other spots, gotten some experience, and kind of understand that they're probably not a starter somewhere, and they can come to an Ohio State, and you can build depth through the portal, right? There's still thousands of guys in the transfer portal, and not all of them are Jordan Seaton. So I like what they've done in terms of addressing starters, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the secondary they went out and added another guy or two to kind of add to depth as well.
I just think that whatever we just said about Terry Moore and needing to be important for Ohio State's secondary, I mean, you would have applied that to Fahim Delane. It's like, oh, Fahim Delane's got to take a jump. Except the difference is you're asking Terry Moore to do what he's already shown you he can do and build on it. You're asking Fahim Delane to do something he's never done before. And unfortunately, that's not how this sport works anymore. It should work like that. Fahim Delane should spend the year. So news is breaking on ESPN that Dante Moore is returning to Oregon for his.
Please do not let Oregon, Ohio State at the shoe be at noon.
You know it.
Please let that be 7:30 p.m. on NBC.
You know it's coming.
Please.
I don't even know.
I don't know about that because Fox also has Michigan, but then Ohio State's got to play at Indiana too, and that could be big noon. Like Fox, I don't know how the selection draft works. I have to refresh my memory.
They're all going to be big noon.
Stop. What were the 3 biggest games on Ohio State's schedule last year coming into the season?
Texas, Michigan,
State.
And what time were those games? Okay. So we don't need to have this conversation right now. They're going to be at noon. I don't even know why. Again, Gillis, you're just so innocent. The
Oregon one game is the only maybe because maybe Oregon can raise enough hell to where they don't make them play at 9 a.m.
They don't play at 9 a.m.
Hey, guess what?
But that's where Fox will look at them and say, hey, you see your fiscal year report?
Hey,
you're playing at 9 a.m.
Hey, guess what? When Oregon came in 2021, guess what time that game was?
Okay. That game was in
early. Rise and shine.
Listen, again,
didn't hurt the Ducks that day.
Listen, we love Gillis. He just has so much hope for logic in a sport that has no logic, those games are going to be at noon.
You know what's illogical? Hey, Big Ten, give us a schedule. Let us know when these games are happening. It's January 14th as you guys are listening.
Yeah, that's
15th
actually
as you guys are
stupid.
listening.
I don't know why we don't know that information yet.
The SEC did it like the first week of December.
Unless the Big Ten's trying to like,
it just means more, I guess.
Unless the Big Ten's trying to take on an NFL approach and like make it a thing. That's the only thing that would make sense.
The SEC made a show out of it as well. It was on SEC Network.
But I'm wondering if like the Big Ten's trying to let this all, like the portal news and all that stuff, and then find like a dead window to do it. It's aggravating for us and for fans because we have to buy tickets and flights and all those and hotels and all those different things. But if they're trying to make a show out, because the NFL does it in like May or something like that, when there's nothing else going on. So if I'm trying to make sense of it, maybe that's how the Big Ten is approaching this. It's like, well, what if they did it in March?
December and January is kind of that only window where like the SEC can no longer do hypotheticals because they're losing bowl games and they're losing in the playoff.
Yeah.
So like you have to put out next year's schedule so we can be like, okay, Texas didn't make the playoff, but they're going to beat Ohio State next year.
Yeah. The Big Ten doesn't have to do that because it's like, why would we talk about next year when this year is still so much fun?
Right. The Big Ten has another game to play, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
So
the ACC does too.
Yeah, so they don't have to do this. So seriously, what if they do this in February? It's annoying for our standpoint, but it's to like only know the first 3 games of the season. But if they're doing that, I understand that from a business standpoint. If it's annoying.
It's also weird that they haven't announced that they're doing that either. Like they've just announced nothing.
They've done nothing of production. Like nothing productive has happened. All they've done is win football games, but nothing productive.
By the way, speaking of not productive, let me make sure I read this right. I'm pretty sure Ross Dellinger just reported that, yes, the vote on jersey patches has been delayed. So we get more time about hypothetical conversations about jersey patches with nothing being passed yet.
Oh boy, I love this sport. Also, the coaches conference, they were like unanimous on increasing the red shirt game number to 9, which is just stupid. Just give them 5 years, man. But I know why you can't give them 5 years.
Have you guys ever talk to your friends after like they get married or something, and then there's so much focus on the wedding? They're like, oh yeah, do you hear John got a new job? Oh yeah, you hear like Susie's pregnant now, and then you're just like, there's like one big event that everybody's focusing on. We're like, oh yeah, by the way, this is also happening, and nobody cares right now. Like it's just crazy that feels like we need to have like a news pod at some point and be like, so here's what you missed. But we're gonna have a yak session, and it's just gonna be a rundown of what everything happened in the last 3 weeks.
The problem is they haven't missed anything because nothing's happening. All the coaches conference did was say they just agreed that they should ask the NCAA to do this.
Why is Dylan Raiola agreeing to be a backup for a year?
Because it worked for Dante Moore. Dante Moore sat behind Dylan Gabriel for a year,
and he's getting
developed. And I'm
and you want to know why?
I think
you want to know why? The real answer is because he's getting compensated pretty well to do it.
Oregon can pay their backups pretty well. That's interesting.
I mean, Ohio State's not paying them. David St. Clair is paid very well. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. David St. Clair, Lincoln Gino's got a pretty penny.
Also, Dylan Raiola has to rehab. I think he blew his knee out or broke his leg.
Here's what I mean, that was.
It's just you guys as well as anyone have followed Dylan Raiola's recruitment. This is a surprising move for Dylan Raiola. We can agree on that.
I'll say this: every move Dylan Raiola has made since he was 14 years old has just been a move that I don't even know how to get. Here's what I'll say.
Also, like, are you going to be surprised if going into the 2027 season, Dylan Raiola transfers and does not go to and is not at Oregon to start?
No. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's nothing. So, like, it's a surprising move. Nothing he does is surprising because everything.
This is a very logical, well thought out, smart move by Dylan Raiola. And I think that's why I'm hesitating on why he made this decision.
You want to know why? What else was a very smart and logical decision? Committing to Ohio State when he did. You want to know what else was a smart and logical decision? Moving to Georgia and going to Buford after you flipped to Georgia so you could be closer to the school you're going to. You know what else was a logical decision? Following your dad's footsteps and going to Nebraska with Matt Rule and trying to revive that. Like every decision they've made has had logic to it. It's just they never stick to anything. They never stick to the plan. I also think I've been thinking about this, and it goes back to something I think Matthew Baldwin said it back in 2019 in the spring of. You're trying to do everything you can as a quarterback to get to the NFL as quickly as possible, which means getting on the field as quickly as possible. But in a world where Sorsby's getting $6 million and Carson Beck is in his 7th year making crazy money at Miami, and like quarterbacks are getting older, I almost wonder if that's no longer true. Because logically speaking, Dylan Raiola would just spend his last year at Nebraska and then go be an NFL draft pick. and get to the NFL as quickly as possible. But that doesn't seem like even Dante Moore. Dante Moore was probably going to be a top 10 pick. And instead, he's coming back for another year. I just don't know.
Talk about a bad year to need a quarterback.
But I think that's quarterback now. I don't think these guys are in a rush as quickly to get to the NFL anymore. And it's because they're getting paid a lot of money now in college with like a free market. And so they can choose to work on developing as quarterbacks so that when they get to the NFL, they don't flame out.
How many times have you seen an NFL quarterback? And this is a conversation maybe that we could have with Julian in a year, but it's like, I don't know, how many times have you seen a quarterback in the NFL get to the league? Like, I think a situation where it's like a Justin Fields or like a Dwayne Haskins where it's like, they only played a year and, they don't have that much experience. It's like, well, you're getting paid now. And it's not so much well, I can't go to this team because they suck. Like, it's not that. It's like hey, if I play for this year, I'll be better and in a better position, and I'll also make a couple $1 million while doing it. It's a completely different landscape. It's a completely different ballgame.
So it just has me thinking about Julian Sand a little bit, because I think what we're used to is Justin Fields was a 2-year starter and he left. CJ Stroud was a 2-year starter and he left. We all think that Julian Sand's going to be a 2-year starter and then he's going to go to the NFL. Is that 100%?
Yeah, probably.
But is that rock solid? Or does Julian Sand go, I don't know, maybe I can get paid to be a college quarterback another year, and so that when I get to the NFL with 3 years as a starter under my belt, it changes some things. So that's what I'm just thinking about stuff. But that's a conversation for a later day. That's Ohio State's portal situation. 33 in, 11 out so far. Again, I just don't think they've lost anybody that they're going to miss. And it's not just about them and how good they are. It's about who they also still have on the roster. They're going to fill the good roster, and it'll continue to be filled out. The portal closes on Friday, but you can continue to add guys. There's plenty of people who have been taking visits to Ohio State and plenty of names who are starting to be linked to Ohio State. So we'll see what happens. And when those things happen, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. That's the purse place. We'll go with that information. In the meantime, for Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.